Hello, thanks everyone for being here. I'm going to take you off the beaten path for a few minutes. So I develop theories for understanding organizations, and I use ethnographic methods primarily, meaning I work in the organizations I study for long periods of time to understand how and why they do what they do. And one of the things that I've been always wanting to know is, what are organizations doing to survive and thrive in a world that has become more and more unstable? And so that's why I lived for almost 2 years in California wine country, because fine wine producers face enormous instabilities. I did not anticipate, though, that the instabilities, that they treated them or regarded them as favorable, very favorably. And what I stumbled into was this unexpected upside of instability, that it can be a valuable source of authenticity. And that's what I'll be talking about today, this notion of authenticity frictions that I developed. So instabilities, I'm referring to sources of disruption that can make even long-standing, well-established activities highly unpredictable. So weather instabilities are a big one. Many industries, tourism, agriculture, key among them, are grappling with unexpected fluctuations in weather, temperature, precipitation. Right, another big source of instability are technological. So just think what generative AI, digital platforms, social media are doing in the productions of TV, film, music, and books. And I think it's super important that organizations learn how to be successful in a world that is so unstable. And my research suggests that rather than insulate from instability, it might be beneficial to lean into it, to purposefully work instability into the production process. And current literature actually doesn't really examine how working with instability can generate value. So that's what I look into. Most management research rather management research doesn't really view instability as something worth enduring for the sake of it. On the contrary, it recommends standardizing, routinizing productions, because quite frankly, surprises can be costly, inefficient, even unsafe to work with. And in life and death settings like medicine or military, this makes a lot of sense. But I question this assumption in other industries, especially cultural industries. Think sports, entertainment, artistic pursuits. In these cultural productions, the collective experience and expression seems to be really salient. But even in these studies of cultural productions, the tensions of collective work are regarded as impediments or at best unintended consequences. And that really surprised me, because in my setting, I found that instabilities are treated as a feature, not a failure of collective work. And in fact, one of the key features in generating value for fine wine. And this really puzzled me, like, why would instabilities be so valued? And my main insight is that fine wine producers are using and turning unstable conditions into a medium for producing authentic expressions. And given the strategic value of instability, firms are actually intentionally sustaining instability, despite, as I say in my paper, bearing significant risks onto workers and the environment in the process. So probably there's not many wine aficionados in the room, so I'll let two esteemed wine writers explain what wine aficionados believe makes authentic wine. First and foremost, wine is a gift from nature. So the vines struggle in search of water and nutrients above the ground. The vineyard teems with life. The grower allows the whisper of the vineyard to steer the direction of the wine. And this is the story of any authentic wine. And this is the story of expressing terroir, terroir is this French idea that the qualities of a wine derive from collective contributions, from the vines, the microbes, the soils, the sun, not just by the winemaker's hand. And expressing these terroir contributions is a basis for authenticity. Therefore, the more a winemaker tries to dominate this process by formulating the colors or aromas or flavors of a wine, which modern technology enables, by the way, right, the less those wines are considered authentic. It's not that they can't be popular, but that wine aficionados don't regard them as authentic, because authenticity for them hinges on this dynamic of collective work that is inherently unpredictable, like the whisper of a vineyard. So this is my theorizing in big picture. There's two main parts here to focus on. The first part is this link between everything in the dotted box and this authenticity box. And what it indicates is that expressing instability is key to achieving authenticity. Meaning you can't just suppress and minimize and work around instabilities, because then there's less to express. The second part of this is everything happening in the dotted box to sustain those instabilities. All the effort that workers put in to turn production instabilities into productive instabilities. All the work that goes in, day out, to allow these instabilities to persist without ruining the production. And I call this result authenticity frictions because the authentic expression is catalyzed by this unstable situation. So my data comes from thousands of hours of direct participant observation. I worked and studied a winery called Cow Crew. It is world-renowned for embracing instability. Just consider this example. They expose their wines to airborne native yeasts and microbes, as opposed to using engineered store-bought commercial-grade yeast and these tightly controlled fermentation tanks that their competitors sometimes do. And this approach is in part why Cow Crew is one of the most highly respected and admired wineries in the world. Wine critics, sommeliers, enthusiasts, other wine producers, they all regard Cow Crew as the epitome of fine wine in the US. And this is a really important point because it shows that among wine aficionados, Cow Crew is already considered to be producing authentic wines. So then I can study the underlying production process of this authenticity production. So I'll show you some of this data now quickly. As the aficionados would expect, everyone at Cow Crew, from the workers to the management, talk about their work as collaborating with nature, playing chess with nature. And they restrict the ingredients, the source of ingredients for their wines, to only those vineyards that they claim to be expressing. Meaning they rely on these terroir actors to contribute all of the wine's quantity, color, tannin, sugar, aromatics, acid characteristics. And they do not allow themselves, for instance, to use grapes from somewhere else, or to add sugars bought from the store, or to make major acid corrections with chemicals. So if these terroir actors mess up, Cow Crew is in serious trouble. And because of this, Cow Crew workers are constantly, daily checking up on these terroir actors the way they check up on their colleagues. So here's an example of the differences. These are two vines growing no further apart than the length of this room. And you can see there are different terroir contributors here and there, leading to this different ripening potential. And Cow Crew wants to work with these differences, despite how unpredictable they are. And in fact, experiencing that volatility is a reassuring sign for the team, surprisingly. It lets them know that they're not dominating the process too much, that they've given latitude to the terroir actors to participate. So here's a quote from an executive. You get these live microbes and grapes coming in, and the temptation is to want to fix it, to silence terroir. But we want to leave it alone. We want to express terroir. The result is, though, you don't know exactly which way it's going to go. Your wine can go south, and I mean, it can just be unusable. So there's a sense here in which Cow Crew is performing a kind of alchemy. They're turning and transforming unstable conditions into authentic fine wine for their consumers. So they're relying on these vines with these soils, with this sun exposure to produce just the right ingredients for their wines. But the vines obviously need help because they don't know Cow Crew's goals. And so there's a lot of careful, skillful, stressful, and technologically sophisticated work that goes into orchestrating this mystique of authenticity. Cow Crew is constantly innovating, experimenting, and improvising to pull this off. So here's a winemaker saying, we can't rely on consistency of our products. It's my job to guide the process, to see where we're going and figure out a path that will get us there, and to do this every year. By consistency, he's referring, for instance, to meeting minimum sales volume requirements, or to reproducing the signature house style of the winery, or to comply with very stringent regulations and certifications. And so to meet all these things consistently year after year, despite doing it differently every year, that's the task, that's the challenge. And this has been working for Cow Crew for a long time, but as when the head winemaker says, things are starting to change. We see fire, we see smoke, drought. We expect to have extreme heat waves. And we're kind of reacting to what it is now and trying to figure out, well, how can we still work with it? So what's happening here is that given Cow Crew's longstanding commitment to making instabilities integral to their production, they're now having to face with this task of working with wicked challenges, challenges that their competitors who don't really care as much about working with instabilities, that they don't have to face as much. So I'll just end here with this one contribution, which is there's a lot of research now on technologies and how they're changing and controlling aspects of our world. Well, I think most of this research actually assumes that the technological control is aiming towards sustaining order, as opposed to what I find, which is that it can be used to sustain instability. My main argument here is that organizations can turn unpredictable contributions from people, from nature, from technology like robots or generative AI into authentic experiences and expressions that are valuable to consumers. The concern here, of course, is that as instabilities are made more normal, legitimate, and valuable to operate with, there may be greater risks and costs for us all to contend with. Thank you, and that's it.